All right, welcome everybody. So this is going to be something a little different than what I normally do. We're going to go over a little Talmud today, and normally I'm more into Torah, halakha, law, things like that. This is going to go into a little more of theology. So I'd actually like to get some participation from the people here. There's no right or wrong answers on any of this stuff. So it's just kind of how do you guys feel about this? What are your thoughts on it? That type of thing. So let me share screen. Share. Okay. Pilchot Mamreim. This was from the last class. Let's get out there. This is the first passage we're gonna be talking about. Okay, so the topic I find to be appropriate for today is gonna kind of deal with suffering. And what does Judaism say to it, about this? You might be kind of surprised to find some of the sources that are present in Judaism. So every religion, not just Judaism, every religion has to deal with a couple of questions. One, why do bad things happen to good people? And I guess the other side of that would be why do we see bad people thriving? When it doesn't seem so just and fair. And the other, why do we, while people are getting punishments beyond what we feel is deserved, why does this type of suffering happen? And what happens when we die? Other religions, they seem to be sort of united on what happens when they die. There seems to be more of a consensus. In Judaism, we seem to have a lot of not so reliable reports. Okay, so it's not unanimous what happens. So, for example, there's different layers to Judaism. Okay, there's the Torah, there's Halakha, there's a lot of other books that a lot of people cling to that others do not. So, some of us who do not um, delve into those books view them as optional, as others view them as obligatory because they like them and they think everyone should like them just as much. So they think that this should be universal, even though it's kind of not. So the Torah which is what should unite all of us. It mentions Sheol, um, but what does that mean? It's sort of described as an underworld where everyone seems to go, not as a punishment, but just as a subterranean type of place, and that's just where people go, and that's all we really know about it. We also have the notion of Olam Haba, or the world to come, but there's questions surrounding that as well. Like, do we go there immediately, or does our soul pause and wait for Mashiach to bring it so then we can enter? These are big questions. There's lots of discussions about it. So we're going to look at some of the proof texts. So what is a proof text, you say? Glad you asked. So oftentimes whenever a rabbi is discussing that this is the right way to look at something, he'll say this is the proof because Proverbs says this or the book of Isaiah says that, and therefore that's the proof that I know I'm right. Then they'll start arguing about whether or not those proof texts are valid. So, we'll see this a lot. So, I guess before we get into this, let's do a blessing. Does anybody know the blessing that we say before we learn words of Torah? Don't worry, I'll assume you all know it and just put it on the spot. So it's Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'devrei Torah. And there's a bit of a mnemonic there for the la'asok, like in English, to soak like a sponge. Means you want to soak up the words of Torah, you want to be engaged in it. So that's the actual translation is blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to engage in words of Torah, including the commandment to study Torah together, which is what we're going to do today. So, what does the proof text say about suffering? All right, so You guys should all know the answer to this question. A little pop quiz. When do we read from the book of Lamentations? Anybody?
In Tisha B Av.
Yes, Tisha B Av. I was going to be very disappointed if you got that wrong, considering what it is. There we go. All right, so Tisha B Av describes the destruction of the first temple, the second temple on the same day. If you go to Wikipedia and look at up all the bad things that happened on Tisha B'Av, it's going to give you a whole list of things that happened that are attributed to Tisha B'Av. Even to this day, people are still saying that this is happening, because of Tisha B'Av and whatnot. So we read Tisha B'Av on I'm sorry, we read Lamentations on Tisha B'Av, who is attributed to writing Lamentations. Some of you should know because we talked about it before we recorded. Really? I already gave this answer. I get silence. Go ahead. Anybody?
What? Yeah, what you said I didn't hear nicely.
Who wrote the book of Lamentations? Who do we attribute this
to? Prophet Yeshaya?
Yes.
Isaiah. Yeah.
Jeremiah.
Oh.
He was there and saw the destruction of the first temple when the Babylonians conquered it. So we attribute this book to him as well as his own book, the book of Jeremiah. So he's got a couple things there. So when we read it, this is what he's describing, the suffering that he's seen at the time. So let's look at Lamentations. Maybe I could pull that up. Lamentations. Looking at what is pulling up here. 30. Is it on? I don't want to read one of these translations. I wonder if they have it on Chabad.org. Lamentations. Book of Echa. Chapter 3. We're gonna read 39 through 42. All right, anyone want to read 39 through 42? Nobody? Guess I'll do it. And why should a living man complain, a man for his sins? Let us search and examine our ways, and let us return to the Lord. Let us lift up our hearts to our hands to God in heaven. We have rebelled and have been disobedient. You have not forgiven. So he's describing here suffering, right? I think I have here. Might be missing a page here. I think I'm missing a page. It's one of the Psalms that I'm quoting. All right. Not as organized as I thought it was. But we can see he's describing suffering. So he's asking what to do about it. This might be one of the Psalms that I'm bringing up here. So there's self-reflection happening. During the suffering, instead of placing blame and causing the suffering of on those who are causing the suffering, he's asking, what did he do to bring about the suffering? Collectively, of course, not saying that he as an individual is responsible for what's happened, but what did we as a people do to bring this about? Okay. Yeah, now this is one of the Psalms. Traditionally, the Psalms are attributed to who? Anybody know? All right, so usually they're attributed to King David. So the question is, did he write all of them? I guess some of the later ones describe events that happened not in his lifetime, but for sure he wrote the earlier ones. And some also say a psalm for David, not by David. So I think there are multiple authors here. But yeah, the early ones were certainly written by our rock star king, our guitar playing king. Wasn't actually a guitar, it wasn't a guitar yet, it was a lyre. It's a stringed instrument. Okay, but one of the Psalms here is Psalm 94. Okay, so it says, my son, do not forget my teaching, but let your mind retain my commandments, for they will bestow on you length of days, years of life, and well-being. Let fidelity and steadfastness not leave you. Bind them about your throat. Write them on the tablet of your mind, and you will find favor and approbation in the eyes of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths smooth. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. It will be a cure for your body, a tonic for your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth. With the best of all your income, and all your barns will be filled with grain. Your vats will burst with new wine. Do not reject the discipline of the Lord, my son, or abhor his rebuke, for whom the Lord loves. He rebukes as a father the son whom he favors. So, what does it seem like is happening here to you guys? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, what do you guys take away from
And it seems like he's giving honor to Hashem.
Yeah, as a father, um, don't rebuke for whom the Lord loves. He rebukes as a father the son whom he loves. Even when we punish our children with tough love, you know, we understand that we're
Yeah.
doing it, you know, and we're kind of giving them hope. So it
Now,
seems like, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, is he also, because I've heard this before, and I think it's just more of a slight for those of us that are committed to Torah study, I have gotten from people of other religions that say, oh, well, you guys think you're wise because you're saying they're studying Torah all the time. And then they'll point back to David and say, he says, don't be wise in your own eyes. You can only get wisdom from God, only him. I said, well, does that remove, do people take it as, I don't take it like this, but do people take it as he's saying that people can't be wise to study, to, we understand wisdom comes from Hashem, but we still have a mind that he gave us. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, you don't have to, you can love and support something without blindly following. But you brought up a good point. We're wise because we have Torah, but Torah came from God. That's the source of Torah. That's the source of the wisdom. So King David is looking around and he sees evil people that don't have Torah. They don't have the teaching of God. And they think they're not going to be punished for what they're doing. When it says, happy is the man whom you discipline, the man who you instruct in your teaching to give him tranquility in times of misfortune, because we know that he will not abandon us. So even though he's punishing us, it's for our own good. We will be better because of the discipline and because we have God and the Torah that he gave us, and they don't. They're out there acting evil because they're not afraid that there's going to be a punishment. But you know, I think when we get punishment, it's from Hashem. It's because he's doing it like a father. I think it's tough love. But there is going to be some things that's kind of hard to deal with coming up. Proverbs. Who wrote Proverbs?
Isn't it said that Solomon wrote Proverbs?
Yes,
Okay.
supposedly the wisest man and I guess that also is on my source sheet that I don't have here. So let's look that up. Let's go back to Chabad. Apologize for being a little disorganized for this one. We're looking for Proverbs. Proverbs 3. One through 12. Anybody like to read 1 through 12?
I can. Let me just get my break put on and I can read it.
Okay.
Give me 1 minute. Sorry.
So, I'm a little disorganized myself, so appreciate your reading. Gives me a time to get my stuff organized. Really throws me off. I'm missing a whole sheet here, which looks terrible because we're recording, but it is what it is. We're doing it live. I would play the Bill O'Reilly clip. It's inappropriate language, otherwise let's splice it in. We'll do it live.
This is a commercial break. A commercial break. Okay.
Not tech
Are you putting? Okay, I see it. Do you want me to begin reading? You just said 1 through 12.
Yeah, I'll scroll down when you get to the bottom.
Okay, great. My son, forget not my instruction, and may your heart keep my commandments, for they shall add length of days and years of life and peace to you. Kindness and truth shall not leave you. Bind them upon your neck, inscribe them upon the tablet of your heart, and find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely upon your understanding. Know him in all your ways, and he will direct your paths. Do not wise in your own sight. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It shall be healing for your navel and marrow for your bones. Honor the Lord from your substance and from the first of all your grain. And your barns shall be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. My son, despise not the discipline of the Lord, and do not abhor his chastening. For the Lord chastens the one he loves, as a father placates a son.
So, what's your takeaway from that?
One thing that stood out to me that and I've read this, but this never sunk into me is where he says, let me get to it. Do not, let me see, do not be wise in your own sight. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It shall be healing for your navel and marrow for your bones. It's interesting that although we always, you hear all these things, yes, do this, turn to him, ask for him, listen to him, guide for him, don't come to him in vain. But it's very profound that the verbiage where he says, don't just being on, we hear this all the time, don't be so caught up in your own wisdom for one, but turn away from evil, and that just by turning away from that within itself, that action is healing. It's to your bones. I mean, to your core. That's I've never noticed that in that reading.
And this is in this life, the life we're experiencing right now, this world. Things will be good for you. And what I would notice from this, I'm glad you brought that up because this is actually what I wanted to say. This word here, fear, does not mean like be terrified that you're gonna, bad things are gonna happen. You're gonna be tortured. That's not the kind of fear we're talking about. This is like awe, like the way you were in awe of your parents when you were a little kid. Yeah, they might punish you. You didn't want that, but they were just larger than life, right? They were Superman. Your dad was able to do whatever. This is what it's talking about when it says fear of the Lord. Don't make me tell your father what you did. Wait till he goes. But this is not the kind of fear that we're talking about here, that you're scared of him like he's a monster. It just means to be in awe of him. And we know that because this is the way King Solomon talked, like he was talking king to his people, like a father to his son, that the Lord chastens, I guess this is chastises, the ones that he loves, the way a father placates a son. So there is a concept in here that, we're basically saying don't reject the discipline of the father, just like a son. But there is a concept that we're going to get into now, which is kind of strange, and it's in the Talmud. So I want to go to that next. And I think it's kind of a natural reaction. If your first reaction is like, what? But I think it's going to make more sense once I explain. So we're in Berachot. Okay. Berachot talks about things that one might pray about. One of the things that you might pray about is like tremendous suffering. We're not talking about, I can't find my keys, so I'm going to be late for work. I'm going to clock in 5 minutes late. We're not talking about that. We're talking about maybe the death of a loved one, maybe things that you're really struggling with. It could be in their times, the destruction of the temple. I've heard it said today, not from an authoritative source, but I would argue if you hear somebody, a modern day rabbi, say something, whatever it is it really authoritative? But I've heard the people make the claim that, again, not saying this is authoritative, that you don't need to fast today because we don't need to remember the destruction of the temple because of what's happening with modern day events. I'm not saying I feel that way. I'm just saying that I've seen people make these types of statements. So there are some people that feel that way. So while we go through this, keep in mind that some of what we're going to read is going to get into an idea that sounds like suffering of people is in some way connected to the deeds of the people, and that maybe we deserve it. Anybody's listening on audio for whatever reasons, when I said we deserve it, my fingers are in air quotes. Okay, I don't particularly endorse this idea, but however, it's not necessarily separate from Jewish thought. Jewish history goes back a long way. So we're going to see where, when you hear some of these ideas, there might actually be a basis for, it's not some wacko coming up with something that we necessarily don't agree with, but there may be some validity to where he's getting this from. So let's look at Berachot 5a. Anyone care to read? I'll do it from the page. Should be the same thing we have on the screen. Okay, so previously the Gemara discussed suffering that results from one's transgressions. And I'm saying maybe your deeds brought it upon yourself. Okay, the Gemara shifts the focus and discusses suffering that does not result from the transgressions and the sufferings of the righteous. Back to why do bad things happen to good people. Okay, Rava, and some say Rav Hasida. Yeah, we're on the same thing. Okay, so already now we're having a dispute about who said this. For everyone that tells you all the Talmud was memorized for thousands of generations, like an almanac, we're memorizing which side of the debate it's going to happen, until that person comes and has the debate and then writes it down. Right here, we see we're not even sure who said this. It's not even clear who it was. But one of these people said that if a person sees suffering that is befallen him, he should examine his actions. Generally, suffering comes about as a punishment for one's transgressions. As it is stated, this is the proof text that they're quoting for this opinion, we will search and examine our ways and return to God. So if bad things are happening, what did you do to bring this about? Did you bring this about in some way because of the things that you've been doing? Okay, Lamentations 3:40. If he examined his ways and found no transgression for which that suffering is appropriate, wouldn't we all like to be, I'm sure I'm such a froom guy, there's nothing that I'm doing wrong. It cannot be that I brought this upon myself. Then he may attribute his suffering to his dereliction of study of Torah. You had free time in your life. You had opportunities to study Torah, and you squandered away. God punishes an individual for dereliction in the study of Torah in order to emphasize the gravity of the issue. As it is stated, happy is the man you punish, Lord, and teach out of your law. Psalms 94:12. This verse teaches us that his suffering will cause him to return to your law. And if he did attribute his suffering to the dereliction of study of Torah and did not find this to be so, he may be confident that these are the afflictions of love, the sufferings of love. As it is stated, for whom the Lord loves, he rebukes, as does a father the son in whom he delights. This is what we just read. So, because he loves you, he's punishing you. He's making you suffer. How do you guys feel about that?
I guess I understand it if I had brought it upon myself in some shape or form. But to suffer for something I had nothing to do with, I guess I would think of like, well, as Ezekiel 18 says, like, well, only the people who sin is going to be the one who has to pay for their own. But I'm also of the opinion that some people's choices you can catch a unintentional stray bullet because of what somebody else did. So I mean, if we're people, more of us need to be committed to keeping more mitzvot than not. So we're all not intentionally suffering, for just for the lack of. I think if more of us is doing what is right, then there'll be mercy for all of us.
Yeah. So it's a good point. It depends on how you apply it. Like from the Torah alone, it says, follow my commandments, you'll get things that are good in this world, rain the appropriate season. You will live long enough to see your children grow old. It's all things in this world. But then that brings up the question, well, wait a minute, this is a good guy. He studied Torah. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't live, long enough to see his children grow old. He died at a young age. So obviously bad things do happen to good people. So then we have to say, okay, like you're bringing up, it's on the macro. If we behave well, this will be a good society. It will be good for your nation. You won't have stray bullets, killing people in the streets, because the society will be a good society that these things are not happening. So definitely, it depends on how you apply it. So let's look at what does Rashi say about this. I know there's a lot of Rashi fans out there, and I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Rashi. However, I have no problem defending people that I disagree with on a lot of issues when they're right, giving credit where credit is due. So Rashi on this, Baruch 5a says, sufferings are the chastisements of love. God makes people suffer in this world, even if they are free of sin, in order to increase their reward in the world to come, so that they will receive more than their actions merit. When I first read this, I'm like, so you're punishing me because you love me, and you're gonna reward me for things because you punished me for things that I did nothing wrong for. I didn't deserve to have to endure this suffering. You know, we look at the book of Job. You love me, so you're gonna do this to me? It's kind of hard to come to terms with. So obviously this sounds terrible, and I think it gets misused as a first line of reasoning. There are rabbis out there, even today, who blame the Holocaust not on the Nazis, but they blame the Holocaust on the Jews. You didn't study enough Torah. You didn't listen to the Orthodox rabbis. You became Reformed. That's what brought about the Holocaust. And then they'll say that this was God punishing you because he loves you. He's going to punish you so that he can reward you in the next world to come. I just saw somebody post today. If we just lost power here. Are you guys still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
You guys are still here?
Yes.
Yes, Rabbi.
The laptop is operating on battery, but I don't have power in the rest of the room. Somebody say something. Let me know if you're here.
Yeah, we hear you.
I'm not sure if we have internet anymore. Are you guys here?
Yes,
Yes.
Rabbi.
Looks like I see people muting and unmuting, but I don't hear anything. So I'm not sure if we are still live or not. Hang on for a minute. See if I can find out what's going on. Okay. Are you guys here? I see you guys, but we're here. You can hear me. Okay, but I can't hear you guys.
Rabbi, we can hear you.
Now I can hear you. So the power went out. Laptop's on battery, so I didn't know if I still had internet. All right. So what was I saying? Nazis. There are rabbis saying that, yeah, because you have a Jewish soul, God's punishing you and putting you through the Holocaust because he loves you so much. And then they try and justify it by this because he's going to reward you, even though you didn't deserve this suffering in this life. It's because he wants to give you a reward in the next world. This is brought up too, for other situations. So yeah, somebody was posting today. I mean, it's not a totally foreign concept. Somebody posted something today saying that the mitzvah to eat matzah was not a reaction to what people did in the Torah, enslaving you so that God will come bring you out and you have to eat matzah. The mitzvah comes first. The mitzvah is the reason for the Torah, meaning he wants you to eat matzah, so he made you become a slave. At first it sounds a little weird, but we've had these discussions before. When you're in, why send your people to be slaves? Pharaoh was going to let you go, but he made you harden Pharaoh's heart. And then the answer is always that, well, he wanted to make it harder for you. That way you appreciate the slavery, the freedom from slavery. He just, let you out, then you appreciate it. You had to make it tough. It's kind of a difficult thing to come to grasp with. But these conversations have been had.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
I remember this was many, many moons ago. I'm almost 40. This was when I was in my mid 20s, let's say 23, 24. I was in the beginning of exploring Christianity at the time. I was a Rastafarian, and then I was just looking into something else. And I remember this, he was an African American pastor. It was at Baptist / something church. And I remember he had this message. He had a high degree. He was a doctorate in theology and whatnot. And he had said, which I was really surprised that the people didn't even push back on this matter. But he had said the reason for the transatlantic slave trade, he said it was a good thing for Black people to go through that because they were worshiping all types of gods. So God was teaching them a lesson to put them through the slave trade so then they can come and worship Jesus. And I remember sitting there thinking, and Rastafarians are very much into historical matters as far as relating to like anything African. So for me, I was really surprised. Like, why would he say something like that? And on top of, why is no one really responding in a concerned way? Because what you're portraying right now, it's more of a religious point of view than the actual physical events that happen, right? I mean, you're only presenting what you think why the slave trade had happened from a spiritual standpoint, but we can see it for what it was written down, and we can make our own assumption. Was a real reason for it, but it really came down to there was a product, people needed something, there was a long history of enslaving people, and it was just easier to make money by taking other people who were already familiar with doing stuff like this. So it didn't really have to be a God took them through the slave trade so they could come worship Jesus. So I remember I was completely turned off by the matter, but everyone else accepted it. And then you could see the people just like, yeah, man, you know what, that kind of makes sense. And then and it really made me think, maybe I'm the one who's looking at it wrong.
There's different
And
perspectives.
yeah, it was, yes. But it also made me think, well, how easy it is when you see like something like a group thing. If no one else is going to push back on it, and it's just like, oh, I never really thought about it that way. Even as egregious as it sounds, it can now become a common way to think for the group. So, I
Muhammad
mean,
Ali,
all in all, yes,
Muhammad Ali said he was glad that it happened because he's a descendant of slaves and he had a better life in America than he would have had if his descendants stayed in Africa. Not good for the people that came over and became slaves, but for the descendants, he felt that he
yeah,
benefited from it. And he lived a long time ago, in his time. Well, I don't even know what that
yep,
was. 50s, 60s, 70s, before
yeah.
now.
I think the matters of suffering, it's hard to say what exactly is correct in the matter, just because you have some people who benefited from. Remember when 9/11 happened, right? There was some like insurance companies, there was people who benefited from that. Yeah, other people who said, well, since God allowed it to happen, it was a good thing. But then it's like you're neglecting the suffering of the people that did go through it. And there was all these different ideas surrounding why this happened, right? But we're also neglecting the fact that, well, there was real people that died. Like, how are we going to take away from that on top of the people who were spared? Because there was many stories like, hey, I was supposed to take that flight, and someone says they believe God intervened. That's why they didn't take that flight. Well, did God not intervene for people who did take that flight? I don't know. Or maybe I don't know. That's all I can really say when it comes to why certain people go through things. I don't know.
And we should not be afraid to say, I don't know. I think it's irresponsible to come out and say, oh, this is why Hashem did the Holocaust. Not that he allowed it, but he proactively caused it. I think it's irresponsible because then with COVID and anything
Yeah.
else, so I have no problem
Yep.
saying, I don't know. So
Yeah.
I have a real problem with people saying some of these things, that he loves you and that's why he's doing it to you. I don't agree with Rashi a lot of the times for other things that he said. And when he says this, my sticker shock is like, really? But I'm going to try and defend it because I think it is worth it. So this should definitely not be your first line of reasoning in these situations. But imagine if you had to go talk to somebody that was dying, somebody that's dying of cancer, maybe a young person, you know, they're diagnosed with terminal cancer. They're on their deathbed and they're coming to ask you, why is this happening? We've gone over 3 reasons. So put yourself in this situation. You go to this person and say, and they ask you, I've been such a good person, why am I dying as a child? There's kids that die at like 12 years old from like leukemia and stuff. Are you going to tell them, well, think about what you've done in this short life. Maybe you deserve it. They're probably going to say, I have a hard time by it. Well, did you have any time where you could have studied Torah and didn't? Maybe that's why this is happening to you. They're probably going to kick you out of the room. So then
Yeah. Nobody wants.
So then you can bring this up. What sounds terrible at first, say, you're right. You didn't deserve this. And what you're going through is not justified. But don't worry. Hashem is going to take care of you in the next world because you see how this can be kind of a compassionate thing to tell somebody at the end of their life.
Yeah.
So I think there's merit to saying this, taking this, saying that this is a punishment, but even though you don't understand why you're getting punished, why as a child you got a little fork or a knife, you're going to the electric socket and he's slapping your hand and telling you, you can't do this. You don't understand why. Just be mad at me, but be alive. That's what we tell the kids. So there is some merit to this line of reasoning. Again, I think it gets used irresponsibly in other situations. Okay, so now there's going to be 3 short stories that I want to go to. And again, I don't want to go and find them on here because it'll probably take too long to look it up and then scroll to this exact section. But this what we've been discussing here is this one little paragraph in Berachot. But if this is in the way, you see where we are here. See all this that you could scroll, and there's good stuff in here too. Read, talking about sparks and suffering, sparks becoming all kinds of demons. There's good stuff in here to read, but I don't want to have to scroll to find all these little examples in the next sections. So I'm just going to read them off of here. Okay, so in Berachot 5b, Rabbi Yochanan. Now this is a rabbi who has healing powers. Okay, the Talmud. There's laws in it, and then there's a lot of stories. Are these stories true? Miracles, we believe in miracles. Were these happening? Were these things that they saw? Or is this a story that we're telling people to convey a message? I'll let you decide. But in this story, Rabbi Yochanan has healing powers. He goes to another rabbi, one of his students. And okay, the Gemara continues to address this issue of suffering when Rabbi Yochanan's student, Rabbi Kia Bar Abba, fell ill. So Rabbi Yochanan entered to visit him and said to him, "Is your suffering dear to you? Do you desire to be ill and afflicted?" Meaning, do you love it? Are you excited that this is happening to you? Rabbi Hia said to him, "I welcome neither this suffering nor its reward. As one who welcomes this suffering with love is rewarded." Like we're talking about, you're getting punished now, but don't worry, it's going to be good for you in the next world. But you can't get that reward unless you go through the suffering to get the reward. So, do you love this suffering? Do you want the suffering to continue so that you can be rewarded in the next world? And he says, "I welcome neither this suffering nor its reward." So Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Give me your hand." Rabbi Hia Bar Abba gave him his hand, and Rabbi Yochanan stood him up and restored him to health. It healed him. So he's saying, I don't want the suffering. I don't care about the reward. I just want it to stop. But it was a choice that was made. Before he healed them, he seems to be making the argument. You could be going through this so that you'll get a reward in the next life. And he gave him that choice, and he just said, "No, I don't want the suffering. I just want the suffering to stop." But these were religious people back then. This is what they believed. They were studying the same things that we study today. So the fact that we see people today wanting to punish themselves and add humrot and make themselves suffer more on Tisha B Av, it's not such a foreign concept when this is what they were studying back then. Okay, so Berachot 5b comes the second story. So similarly, Rabbi Yochanan fell ill. This is the one that has the healing powers. So Rabbi Hanina entered to visit him and said to him, "Is your suffering dear to you?" He asked him the same question. "Do you love it?" So Rabbi Yochanan, the one with healing powers, said to him, same answer. "I welcome neither this suffering nor its reward." So Rabbi Hanina said to him, "Give me your hand." He gave him his hand. Rabbi Hanina stood him up and restored him to his health. So then the Gemara asks, why did Rabbi Yochanan wait for Rabbi Hanina to restore him to health? If he was able to heal his student, let Rabbi Yochanan stand himself up. Let him heal himself. So if Rabbi Yochanan is healing other people, why doesn't he just heal himself? So the Gemara asks that question, and it answers its own question. It says, generally, a prisoner cannot free himself from his prison, but depends on others to release him from his shackles. Somebody else has to come with the key to take the handcuffs off and let you out. So the lesson here is even a healer needs to be healed. Even somebody, he needs other people. He's relying on other people to come and help him. So I think the message there is that you could be that person. Don't think that just because this other person, this greater person, is so great that he doesn't need you, who's not on the same level. You could play the same role to those above you as he's playing to others. Okay, the third story is a little bit longer. Barachot 5b. The Gemara relates that Rabbi Eleazar, another one of Rabbi Yochanan's students, fell ill. Rabbi Yochanan entered to visit him and saw that he was lying in a dark room. Okay, it's not unusual, to think if somebody is sick, they're lying in a dark room. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan exposed his arm, rolls up his sleeve, and light radiated from his flesh, filling the house. So did he have some type of skin that was like a light bulb? Is he performing magic tricks? It seems kind of strange to us today to think people are walking around with these powers to do these types of things. However, there were stories back then of these things happening. So I'll leave it up to you to decide if this is just midrashim or if there's a literal story. But when the room lights up, he says to him, "Why are you crying?" He was thinking that his crying was over the suffering that he endured throughout his life. Rabbi Yochanan attempted to comfort him. He says, "If you are weeping because you did not study much Torah as you would like, we learned one who brings a substantial sacrifice and one who brings a meager sacrifice have equal merit as long as he directs his heart towards heaven." So what does this mean? Somebody brings a big sacrifice and somebody brings a small sacrifice, but they're equal. Somebody brings you a check for $1 million. Somebody brings you a check for $5 and it's the same amount. How does this make sense? So it says, as long as he directs his heart towards heaven, then they're the same. So this is a concept that I personally believe in, is that intention matters. So I don't think Hashem judges us on the objective amount that you gave, meaning this person gave more money, this person gave a bigger sacrifice. I think he judges us on the percentage of your potential that you gave. $1 million is more than $5, but if $1 million is 1% of your income, is that worth as much as somebody who gave $100 when they only had 200? They gave 50% of their potential versus somebody who only gave 1% of their potential. This to me makes sense. And I think that's what it's saying here. So if you're saying that he's speculating, if you're under the impression that your suffering is coming because you didn't study enough Torah, this is one of the three reasons: dereliction of Torah study. If you studied Torah during the time that you had with intention, then that can be just as meritorious. There's the Shulchan Aruch says that one who prays a little with intention is better than one who prays a lot with no intention. So if you want the Shulchan Aruch as a source for what I just told you, my personal opinion is, you can use that to justify my personal opinion. So that's what he says, if you think you're suffering because of the dereliction of Torah study. If, however, you are weeping because of lack of sustenance and you are unable to earn a livelihood, as Rabbi Eleazar was indeed quite poor, so it's reasonable to think maybe this is why he was crying when he lit up the room with his arm. If that's why you're crying, not every person merits to eat off of two tables, one of wealth and one of Torah. Meaning, you don't get everything in life. Maybe you're not going to be the richest person in the world and have all the stuff that comes along with that. That's the hand that life dealt us. But you can have Torah. So you do not need to bemoan the fact that you are not well. I said that's the hand that life dealt us. If you are crying over children who have died, this is the bone of my 10th son. Suffering of that kind affects great people, and they are afflictions of love. So Rabbi Yochanan used to have a bone from his 10th son that died, and he used to carry it with him in his turban as a reminder of some suffering that he went through. So he's saying, if you lost a son, you're sad and you don't understand why this has happened. Hey, it's happened to me too. I've actually lost 10 sons, and I keep one of his actual bones to remind me of that. And sometimes suffering of that kind afflicts great people, even people like Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Eliezer said to Rabbi Yochanan, I am not crying over my misfortune, but rather over this beauty of yours. So when it says beauty, this beauty of yours, I guess Rabbi Yochanan was a very handsome guy. There's stories about how he was so good looking that women would come out of the bathhouse and he would be standing there. They would see him and they would be thinking of him while they were with their husbands, and the children would come out looking like him because that's how beautiful he was. And so just the thought of him would somehow make the children look like him. So infer from that story whatever you want. The point that it's making is that he was supposed to be a handsome guy. Okay, so he says, I'm not crying because of my misfortune, but rather over this beauty of yours that will decompose in the earth. As Rabbi Yochanan's beauty caused him to consider human morality. Rabbi Yochanan said to him, over this, it is certainly appropriate to weep. Both cried over the fleeting nature of beauty in the world and death that will eventually overcome all. Meanwhile, Rabbi Yochanan said to him, is your suffering dear to you? Rabbi Eliezer said to him, I welcome neither the suffering nor its reward. Upon hearing this, Rabbi Yochanan said to him, give me your hand. Rabbi Eliezer gave him his hand. Rabbi Yochanan stood him up and restored him to health. So the reason that he cried was a worthy one. Now that I'm sitting here going over it again, I'm sitting here thinking, well, your beauty might have just been, being a beautiful person, not what you looked like, even though there were stories about his physical attributes. They say he was very handsome like me. But you can take that to mean that the reason that he cried was a worthy one, because of how he was there with him, and how he was responding to him on his deathbed, or maybe not his deathbed, but while he was suffering. So we need to go visit the sick. That's kind of the moral of the story. So what are you going to say to him? Are you going to say it's because, God loves you, this is why he's torturing you? So the story is of three interfaces with suffering. First one, how do you feel about suffering because God loves you so much that he wants to reward you later because of it? Do you love it? The answer is no thanks. Most of us don't want to deal with it. Number two, we see that even the ones that give the most need us, and we should be there for them. Little old us can have a great impact on those that we see as greater than ourselves. And we've probably all experienced that. People that we look up to, they turn around and tell us that actually we've influenced them. We probably all experienced that. Okay, and the third one is that if we go visit someone who is suffering and they don't believe it's because they deserve it, and they don't believe it's because they squandered their Torah study time away, we can teach them this, that I don't believe in a God who's in the business of making us suffer. I don't believe in a God who chooses to make us cry. But I do believe in a God who sits down and cries with us. The answer to suffering is not to just sit there and wait for the reward. I think suffering should teach us I think suffering should teach us compassion and empathy. I think evil is actually what lacks those emotions. This is why one of the you know, the warning signs that somebody's going to be a serial killer when you see them torturing animals. It's not saying that this for sure means they're going to be a serial killer, but it's one of the warning signs. They don't have empathy. They don't have compassion. Um, so when it comes to things like the Holocaust, I think it's irresponsible to say that God is causing this suffering. It's not deserved because he loves you and because he's going to reward you. And because this will bring about a way for him to send people over to this land where he can then bring his religious people in. I don't believe that. So I think an answer that people don't often like is that, well, how do you know God even knew this was happening? Maybe he didn't know you were going to sin before you did it, just like you don't monitor your children, which doesn't mean you don't have the ability to monitor them, doesn't mean you don't have the ability to see them. But it means you didn't know they were going to do something that you were very upset about before they did it. Perhaps he didn't either. And perhaps he's going to, we see Hashem remembered this, remembered Noah on the ark. Maybe he's going to remember what's going on and be very disappointed in what he sees. I think that's a much more compassionate answer to this, but there are people who disagree with it, and they're welcome to. Who's making the point that those that disagree, they have precedent in the Talmud to derive their view of God doing this. I disagree with it. I take the more compassionate approach. So what's the conclusion? Whatever beauty and talents we have, they will all fade into the dust. So all we really have are these moments with each other. So let's make them count. So on that, I want to say I appreciate you all being here and learning this with me. I appreciate these moments with you, even though my beauty will one day fade into dust. We can still enjoy the moments that we have with each other. So hopefully, if you've got anything out of this, you'll use this to go out there and do good for others. Anybody would like to contribute what they took away from this before we end the recording and continue the conversation?
I would say life is short. We have to make the best out of what we have right here and now.
I agree. There's a Rob Thomas song about that. It's called These Small Hours or These Little Wonders or something. He tells the story about how he just gotten off stage, big crowd, tens of thousands of people, and he goes to his little tour bus, and he's walking his little dog, some little tiny dog, and he's thinking, I don't want to do this. I want to be doing rock star things, right? But the dog's looking up at him, wagging his tail, just so happy. This is like the happiest moment in the dog's life. This moment, walking on a leash and going. That's why he wrote the song. It's like, this is what life is about, taking advantage of these small moments. Even what seems like maybe nothing to somebody else might not even want to be there. But it might be a big life-changing moment in your life, in their life, that you are impacting, that you don't even realize you're doing until they later come back and say, remember when you said this? I don't even remember saying that to you, but it changed my life. So we can have these impacts on other people, not even realize that we're doing it. And I can tell you that my life.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say that I've experienced that in my life with people, and so I'm sure you all have as well. So
yeah, it gives you time to reflect on, especially someone who made an impact in one shape or another that's no longer here, through, something health-wise or some accident that happened or, some nefarious. But I know people personally, just some of the neighborhoods I grew up in that, those people are not here anymore because of other people's greed and jealousy and whatnot. And, it gives you, if you're looking for the wisdom and what to take out of it, you know, you can see how, man, you're really here for a moment, and then you're just not. And the reality is, not all of our names is going to be written in some historical book that people is going to be reading about how great we were, right? I mean, how many of our own Jewish histories we're reading of some people who made a significant enough for whatever reason, and we're reading about them now centuries later. But there's so much other people, their names just never made anybody's writing.
Yeah.
Is that to say that they never did anything worth not being written about? Maybe someone didn't get around to it, or it just disappeared. Maybe the paper crumbled. But the people who experienced what that person did for them, they're the ones who will remember them for however long they can remember them and pass on their memory. So, you know, I think that's more of, for me, I think that's more valuable. You know, the people who's not really going to write about me, but they're going to remember what I did in some shape or form. And hopefully, you know, I left a better impression for my time here than not. And, you know, depending what culture you come out of, maybe someone makes a sacrifice for you and try to remember your name, or, you know, maybe that was it. I don't know. I mean, I'm gone, so I don't know if the person I didn't want coming to the funeral showed up or not. I'm not here, so that's it.
Yeah, there's amazing people that will never be written about for sure. That's a shame.
Oh yeah.
That's what he was crying about. Your beauty will eventually return to dust and won't be here anymore. As far as them being at your funeral, um, there's a belief that's very popular in Judaism that the soul sticks around for a while. So if you speak out loud, the soul will hear what. So it's not too late. If you lose a loved one, you can still speak to them. I personally believe that. I'm not big on teaching as fact what happened, so I'm not going to guarantee it, but I can just tell you I personally believe it. I'm going to end now before I start tearing up. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you, Rabbi.